Hey, this is Monique. Welcome to One Mo Project. This time I'm going to show you how I made the fishing hole to put all those fun fish in, because how are you going to go fishing if they're just scattered everywhere? This is a way to make a fishing hole for them to be in for fun and a place to store them so that they all stay together. You know how that goes when you have a little one. Anyway, here's how it went. I cut out a circle out of green and blue and some batting that's 13 inches. And I just used a bowl from the kitchen to make a nice circle. But in order to make these stiffer, because this was going to be the bottom of the fishing hole, I quilted it. Now, I didn't follow some beautiful pattern because this was going to be the bottom of a fishing hole. So I just did random lines, kind of tried to go back and forth and make them squiggly all the way across until I had made the whole bottom quilted, because this is what made it stiffer. And the more I did, the stiffer it got. But I also did a 1/4 inch seam around the edge and zigzagged the edge before I called that finished. In order to get the sides the right size, I could have done the math, you know, with the circumference and pi, and I got out my tape measure just so I could make sure I got it right. And I put a pin in the place where I started so that when I got all the way back around, I knew I was done. But this circumference of my circle was 39.5, so I needed the sides to be the same size. Now, this was 9 inches tall, and then I folded it so that my flowers ended at the same place, because the distance to the end was different on them. So I folded so that the flowers lined up on the end, and cut this at 20 inches because that I needed the extra 1/2 inch for my 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides. So I added a little more. Cut it out of the blue, and then I just did the one side seam on both of these pieces so that they become tubes. And there again, it's important that I kept it at 1/4 inch because that had to fit the circumference for the bottom of the fishing pole. Fishing pole, fishing hole. Now, ultra firm stabilizer. This is key because this stuff really was stiff. Look, I used it underneath when I painted, so there are flowers on it. Anyway, this stuff was really stiff, and it's also got the heat activated glue on it. I just wanted to butt it end to end because I wanted to use the whole length that I had. So I sewed this blue scrap from the end of the stand-up part, the middle, I don't know what to call that, the inner, the lining. Anyway, I sewed that on one side and then attached it a little bit on each end there to hold it in place. And instead of trying to sew across this really stiff stuff without enough room to fit up onto the sewing machine, I just went forward and backwards and made like a really wide zigzag all the way across to hold those two together where they're just butted together instead of overlapping. I was trying to make it smooth and keep all of the length that I had. Now, look at that. Do you see it stand up? So then the two pieces that make the inside and the outside of the fishing hole, I pin them together at their seam, and then I pin them all the way around. Sometimes I don't pin things, I know, but this, because the one layer could walk a little bit, this way they didn't slip on each other and end up with a big pleat at the end or something. So I pinned those in place and sewed them at 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Now, I did one thing wrong though, and you'll see that when I get out that ultra firm stabilizer. I did not allow for a seam allowance on that because I did not sew it all the way to the top because I knew it was going to be impossible to fold that over. So it's a little bit too long. It's the seam allowance too long. So it'll be fine, but it was one of my things where I didn't do my math correctly. Oh, math! Okay, so then once I put this up inside of there, it takes a minute to work all of that stiff, ultra firm stabilizer inside of this. Then I made sure to get my seam allowance on the same side all the way around because I wanted to pull it down tight across that top edge. And if the seam allowance walked back and forth inside of there, it was going to make it hard to keep it down tight. Because I wanted the green to stop right at the top and the blue to start right at the inside for, you know, like a fishing hole where the water's on the inside. So I pulled all that down and pinned that around. I don't sew over these pins because that stabilizer is so firm that it was going to bend the pins or break the needle or something. But you can see it's a little bit too long at the bottom, and that's because I did not account for that seam allowance across that top edge. I cut it the same size as the blue and the green. Anyway, that's easy enough to fix. All I have to do is cut that off. But before I did that, I went ahead and sewed a 1/4 inch seam all the way around the top edge to hold everybody in place and keep everything good. And you know, if I knew, when you know you're going to do it and you got the pins in it, the sooner you can get those pins out, the better, because sometimes they come back and they bite you. So rude. All right, so that looks good. But see there, it's too long on the bottom. Trim that right off. All right, so now in order to make the heat activated glue on the stabilizer activate, you have to iron it. But the problem I had was that the big flowers are heat transfer vinyl, so you can't iron them. The butterflies do. You can't iron over them again or you'll melt them. So I could only iron from the one side. If I made another one and I was going to do that, I would probably wait and put my decorations on after, now that I've learned the hard way. In order to divide up the bottom evenly, I folded it there and put 4 pins in it to divide it into 4 quarters. And then I pinned each quarter at a 1/4 way around by folding the walls of the fishing hole. But then I went back in and put some more pins, because circles can be challenging sometimes. But I put a lot more pins in between each of those quarter sections, because the right place for it to fit is not the edge of the circle, it's the seam allowance of the circle. So anyway, more pins are better. So sew that along with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then zigzag around the edge to keep it all together. Turn it the right sides out and look at it. Man, this is fantastic. Now we have a fishing hole to put our fish in and to go fishing. Ta-da! Thanks for watching. I hope that's useful. I hope you can make a fishing hole for your somebody special, so you can put all the fish in and they can go fishing, and you can have a place to put them all to store them once you're done, because, you know, hopefully you didn't just make one fish. I love the story when Jesus told the disciples to come follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Immediately they left their boats and their nets and everything and they followed him. I want to be like that. I want to be obedient like that. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye.